Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. And as always, we're here to bring you an eclectic set of opinions on whatever media we happened to review this week and decide for you if it's worth your time.
Indeed, yes, and good to see you, Ninja. Been
Hey,
a
Ninja.
while. Yes, we are reviewing a one of our reviews is a Christmas classic, um, and along with some new and newish stuff, including DB actually going to the theater to seeing a new movie, which
Right, like I'm some sort of proper movie reviewer or something. I don't know.
yeah, yes, and of course I'm controlling the images this week once again. Let me.
Last week I was house sitting. This week I just good old fashioned sick. So I'm sitting in my easy chair with my feet kicked up and putting it all in Daniel once again.
Yes, indeed. And for our first review, we have not quite a Christmas classic, but something. It's a holiday of sort. Well, I guess it is a holiday movie. Uh, Beetlejuice.
Yeah, so this is the sequel to the original Beetlejuice, naturally,
Yes.
with a name that's designed to be somewhat hard to do searches for because, of course, you just get more options for Beetlejuice when I was looking for posters. I had to narrow it down to Beetlejuice 2024 to make it finally work.
Yes, or Beetlejuice 2, either way.
See, when I did Beetlejuice 2, people have wanted this movie for a long time, so I was mostly getting just fan posters for a hypothetical Beetlejuice 2.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. Well, but but we did eventually find a poster for it.
Yes, indeed. I'm talking about an inconvenience of a minute's worth, not any great Herculean task, as opposed to sitting through the darn thing.
Yes, indeed. And and Ninja, you are onto something with DB solo review. Um, but yeah, so Beetlejuice, it takes place whatever it is 35 years after the first movie. Um, what Winona Ryder's character, Lily, is that right?
Is it Lydia? One second.
Lydia, thank you. Yeah, Lydia's all grown up, and she's working as a TV psychic. Uh, and she then, but then she gets some uh, bad news when she goes to visit her stepmother, who's now this like weird modern art, you know,
What basically
person.
happened is that I guess eventually, this is Catherine O'Hara playing Delia Dietz. I guess Delia's husband was eventually able to buy her an actual art career. The first movie, like it's clear that it was. I thought it was pretty clear that she was just a hobbyist who people put up with because of money.
Yeah.
And after 30 years of spending someone else's money, she managed to get traction.
Yes. Yeah. Um, yeah, and but then they of course Lydia has a her manager slash boyfriend. What was his name?
Richard,
Richard. Yeah, Rory.
Rory. Oh
Um,
wait, that's right. Richard was.
Richard's Richard was her first husband.
That's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna just take a moment here to say there are too many characters in this movie, and I believe if I heard right at the time, it started life as a season of a Beetlejuice TV show on Max, or at least
Yeah.
it was like originally intended as a streaming movie of some sort before they decided to uh, bulk it up a little bit. I
Yeah.
If it did start life as a TV show, that would actually make a lot more sense because again, way too many characters for its runtime.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah, because then we're introduced to Lydia's daughter.
Oh, sorry, I think I distracted you. So yeah,
Okay,
so Lydia's father has died in a tragic, um, the tragic bird watching shark attack accident.
a plane crash.
Yes, a tragic bird watching plane crash shark attack accident, which
Yes.
which is weirdly done in stop motion animation, which I think it's just because what's his name? Tim Burton just likes stop motion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're both coughing tonight.
Yeah,
um,
I got you beat though.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so okay, so they're having to organize his funeral. At the same
Mhm.
time, Lydia's jerk boyfriend slash manager, uh, who is very much trying to pressure her into marriage, uh,
Yes.
they go back home, and their relationship is a subplot. And then you have their daughter, played by Jenny Ortega, Astrid Dietz,
Yes.
which it didn't hit me until just now. Interesting how she had her mother's last name.
Yeah, and not her father's last name.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, no. Richard isn't listed as having a last name, so maybe they just don't want to have to deal with another name.
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe. Yeah.
But so did I say Jenny Ortega? Jenna Ortega. Excuse me.
Yeah. Close enough.
Yep. I is this the first thing we've reviewed with her in it?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she's most known for playing Wednesday in that Wednesday Adams Netflix show.
Right. So every time I see Jenna, I think to myself, is she an unauthorized clone of Aubrey Sitterson? Because they just have most of the time, at least when I see Jenna, she is just has that same sort of blank, resting blank face, uh, tired of the world attitude that Aubrey brings to her performances.
Yeah, which makes her perfect for Wednesday Adams.
Yep, and for that matter, makes her perfect to be Lydia's moody daughter.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the background, Beetlejuice's wife, who apparently is the one who killed him, as we find out long, uh, in a long
Flash.
flashback sequence in Spanish for some reason,
Yeah.
uh, has managed to escape from whatever was holding her in place, and she's now going through the underworld, making people dead.
Yes, and she starts with uh,
Danny
Danny
DeVito.
DeVito in a wasted cameo.
Yeah, you and meanwhile, Beetlejuice's like bio, what was it?
Bioexorcism.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bioexorcism business is also booming because he's got a whole bunch of those guys with shrunken heads working for him.
Yeah, and one of them is named Bob, which
And so
which I believe had a very small role in the first movie.
he did. Basically, that shrunken head guy was just there in a couple of the gag shots while in the waiting room to the underworld,
Yeah. Yeah.
while the headhunter who had headhunted him was just, they're just both waiting for the number to get called.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
then, as an additional set of characters and plot elements,
yeah.
Willem Dafoe doing his best Dirty Harry impression
Yeah.
as a underworld police officer who everyone also acknowledges as an actor question mark
Yeah.
trying to get to the bottom of Beetlejuice's ex-wife. And also Astrid meets a nice guy in a house that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 90s. While she's in town for her father's funeral, and they start a romantic entanglement. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is not a especially long movie. It comes in, was it?
Hour 45.
Yeah, hour 45. Like I think they kind of needed an extra half hour to make any of this feel like it was paid off.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of movie left over. Um, and Ninja asks if the original movie was female led. No, it wasn't. It was mostly ensemble. The main characters were Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis,
Right.
who were not
Which,
in this movie.
yeah, the only reference to them is when they're the opening scene is a pan of the model that represents the small town. It's like, reference to the miniature of the small town that was such a big part of the first movie. You can kind of, I noticed that they had representations of them standing outside of um, standing outside of the town. So I don't know if that was supposed to subtly represent that they had moved on or they were trapped out or something. I just don't know.
Yeah, yeah. They never. It's never explained what happened to them.
Never even mentioned, which is weird because the previous movie ended with them and Lydia being best buds and them basically being like a surrogate aunt and uncle for her.
Yeah, yeah, and there were there. She mentions them briefly when they're
Did
up in
she?
the
Okay.
attic. Yeah, and she's like, "Oh no, it was made because Astrid, I think she asks like, well, did somebody else make the model?" And she said, "No, it was made by the Maitlands," and that was
Okay.
it.
So
Yeah,
that yeah, so in my case, literally a blink and you miss it reference.
yeah, yeah, it was.
Oh, and also Beetlejuice is still trying to get him some human girl tang
Yeah,
or living tang.
yeah, he's been stalking her, Lydia for the last 30 years, like just kind of popping up when she can like see like catch glimpses of him, and then he disappears.
Yeah, so again, like this is an overstuffed movie, and I think that I would have been more entertained if I hadn't just seen the previous movie a couple months back.
Yeah.
'Cause I think where a lot of this movie benefits is it's honestly it's member berries.
Yes. Yeah.
So like if it had been, I don't know, 10 years since the last time I saw Beetlejuice and I hadn't gotten myself refreshed on it, I'd be like, haha, I remember the head shrunk guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Or oh yeah, I remember when they were on Titan and being chased by the sandworm.
Yep. Oh, I remember when they had all those scenes using the song Deo. Haha,
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
it quirky that uh, a child's choir is singing this at the husband's funeral?
Yeah. And
Which like
we, yeah.
that struck me as such a weird moment too, because it's not like it was his favorite song or anything. If anything, that would be a song he associated with. Oh yeah, remember that time that Beetlejuice tried to force us out of the house and possessed us in turn and forced us to sing the song?
Yeah. Yeah, and Ninja asks if that the member berries or why it did well at the box office. I think that's largely a big reason for it.
Definitely
Um,
didn't hurt.
it
Um, Also, Jenna Ortega is like one of those Gen Z celebrities who people are like lemming like to go support. Um,
yeah, yeah, sort of like Timothy Chalamet, very similar
yep,
following. Yeah,
yep. So it's like she was good casting. And also Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. He's great.
yeah,
Just there actually wasn't all that much of him as much as you'd expect for a movie where you didn't have to spend time introducing him.
yeah. I'd be curious to see which movie he had more screen time in, the first one or this one,
That's a good question. It would
because
probably be this one, but it wouldn't be by much.
not by much, yeah. Yeah, because that was what struck me when I watched the first movie was that he wasn't in it that much.
Right, which makes it especially weird not to have the Maitlands in it at all. Like I get it, you can't, you may not want to get Alec Baldwin back, especially with what was going on with him legally while this movie was in production.
Yeah, and I'm sure Gina Davis had zero interest in being in this movie. So
But
yeah, let's understand that.
since they were the main characters of the first one, I think that you do kind of lose something not having them around.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and actually, if I remember right, when this movie came out, a lot of the people who enjoyed the first movie weren't really that enthused with this one.
Yeah, I remember like Tom over at Midnight's Edge having a discussion with another longtime Beetlejuice fan about his problems with the movie.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not a horrible movie, but it's certainly, yeah, like you were saying, it's too many characters, too many subplots, um, and just yeah, it definitely needed, like you said, maybe another 20 minutes on the runtime just to flesh some stuff out. In particular with Beetlejuice's wife, which like she's set up as this like Thanos level threat,
Right. Like
and
this
then
is a big deal. She can suck out your soul's soul and just leave you null.
yeah, yeah, and nothing really happens with it.
No, she gets a couple of people eh, and then she shows actually yeah, let's put a can on the spoiler talk for a second here.
Yeah,
Okay, so what are the nice parts of the movie? Well, uh, if it wasn't Danny Elfman doing the soundtrack, someone borrowed from him pretty liberally.
yeah,
So it had a nice soundtrack. Um, I think all of the actors did their best with what they had.
mm,
Um, I'll give Catherine O'Hara particular props for once again perfectly portraying an out of touch rich white woman from New York who thinks she's an artiste.
yeah,
Basically, a Karen before we had the word for it.
right, yeah,
The special effects are very nice. Even like the pointless um, scene, like the claymation scene of the father's death, was surprisingly well done for what it was.
yeah, yeah. It might have been the only way they could have shown how he died. That might have been another reason they did it that way.
Oh yeah,
Because
like the boy.
he dies a very horrific death.
Yeah, and you see the after effects of it because in Beetlejuice world, however you die, that's how you are in the afterlife.
Yeah,
Uh, like his head is just gone through the whole movie. Now,
yeah,
that's the other thing is that my understanding is that this movie didn't have a whole lot of CGI in it. Um,
yeah,
like there were a couple of things that probably were at the very least computer assisted, if not, yeah. But there's like a lot of nice practical prosthetics and effects and whatnot.
yeah,
So it's like production wise, it's all good. All right,
yeah,
so I would say don't expect anything too deep. If you're a huge fanboy of the original Beetlejuice and for some reason you haven't seen this already and are waiting for our recommendation
yeah,
in December for whatever reason,
yeah,
uh, you may not have a good time. Um, and if you're a casual Beetlejuice fan, you will probably enjoy being reminded of things.
yeah.
All right, spoiler time on count of three. One, two, three. So I think the funniest thing to me is that they basically had the exact same storyline as the last Ghostbusters movie, and they're
Yeah. Sorry.
just honestly done a bit better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because you find out that the boy that Astrid is has fallen for is actually a well-known murderer who has been inhabiting the house of where he killed his parents for ages.
yeah. And then he fell out of the house or fell out of the tree and broke his neck when trying to flee from the police.
Right, which is why he looks mostly normal. So
Yeah,
that tracks with the rules of the world. And so he's trying to use Astrid to get back to life. I think my problem with him his inclusion is that it does on the one hand it does give Astrid something to do, and it does put Astrid in a situation where Lydia has to deal with Beetlejuice.
yeah,
But here's me, he's basically just a prettier version of Beetlejuice himself.
yeah. He is.
Um, but because of how quick the movie is, there isn't a lot of time to develop any of this. I think that you could have had a whole movie that didn't necessarily involve Beetlejuice himself, just about that guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a good story. Um, Beetlejuice's wife is just a complete waste, and you almost wonder if they just came up with the effect and the actress and said, "Yeah, we'll figure it out."
Yeah. Yeah, that was the part of the movie that irritated me the most. It was just like, okay, well, you set her up like this, but nothing is coming of it.
Right. She just gets dispatched in the last scene by Deus Ex Titan Worm.
Yeah. And after a bizarre, Beetlejuice choreographed and sung
MacArthur
wedding,
Park.
yeah, with MacArthur Park, which is an interesting choice of song. Um, which was that in the first movie?
I don't believe that MacArthur Park itself was featured in the first movie,
Okay.
which I suppose makes it not a member berry.
Yeah.
If it was, I don't remember it.
Yeah, I don't remember it either.
I guess like the first movie tended to feature more like mambo songs, so that's
Yeah.
um, and also Lydia's relationship with her boyfriend slash manager gets resolved very quickly when it turns out
Mm.
that he never believed in her.
Yeah.
He was just there for the money,
Yeah. And
like his
yeah.
last wife, or no, like his no, he never had a wife. He was just an abuser.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, he was only pretending to have a dead wife so he could pick up chicks.
Yeah,
Great guy.
what a great guy.
Yeah.
But like I think that the biggest emblem of this movie and how it treats the original is the fact that they took the head shrunken guy who
Yeah.
was just a little gag, said
Yeah.
people remember that fondly, so we're going to just make it more generic, have more of them, give them more screen time, and then they just kill Bob right like by having his soul sucked out, so he's just gone.
Yeah. That's poor Bob.
Yeah. Honestly, they should have saved a couple of these subplots for Beetlejuice, which they're going to want to make now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because this movie did very well.
It's interesting. Like it did very well domestically, but I think I want to say it's like its international box office was like half as big.
Yeah.
Let's find out the numbers. Beetlejuice.
Mhm.
Yeah, 294 versus 155. So
Yeah.
now you get more of that domestic box office, and so this movie was almost certainly profitable unless they did some really creative Hollywood counting. But
Yeah.
I can see why it wouldn't convert any newbies because the member berries.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's on Max now. If any of you are so inclined to watch it.
If we haven't dissuaded any of you from spending your time on it,
Yes. But uh, speaking of dissuading people from spending time and at least right now money on a movie. DB.
yes, I did in fact see the Fire Emblem movie, judging by the art style here.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings, the War of the I can't pronounce this.
War of the
that word.
Rohirrim.
Rohirrim. Okay, War of the
Yep.
Rohirrim. All right.
Yep. So saw this Friday night. There were about 15 people in the theater with me
Mm.
and my buddy. So I'm going to admit that part of my enjoyment of this was that he was there. We were just whispering like, little roasts to each other as we went through. I hope we didn't disturb anybody because we were having a good time with it.
Yeah.
Also, hey D Rhino.
Hey, D Rhino.
So, so start off. What is War of the Rohirrim? So War of the Rohirrim is basically a $30 million attempt to keep the film rights to Lord of the Rings while while Warner Brothers works with Peter Jackson on some other things. And from a cynical perspective, if I'm trying to keep and this is nothing new actually. Probably the most infamous case of this was in the early '90s. A company had the rights to Fantastic Four, and it was about to expire if a movie wasn't produced. But the way that the contract was written, they didn't actually have to release a movie; they just had to produce a movie. So
Yeah.
they brought in is it Roger Corman or Robert Corman? Roger Corman.
Roger. Yeah.
And they brought in Roger Corman, gave him $1 million, and said, "Make something." And nobody who worked on that movie was in on the gag except for Corman.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who's like the B movie king, like never lost money on a single movie because he just fire and forget, move very quickly, low budget.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
This is the closest I think you could do to making a fantasy movie on even remotely the same technical level as a Lord of the Rings movie. Basically, they hired an anime studio. I heard in one video that this like parts of it were sent out to like it was either 30 or 60 different studios, like because this thing was kind of rushed. So on one level, it almost feels wrong that we're basically we're paying to watch for a $30 million contract extension.
Yeah.
But that's not fair to the movie itself, and some of that are details I only found out after the fact. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what the actual experience of the movie was itself. So, War of the Rohirrim is based on a story told in the appendices of Tolkien, and it is basically the origins of how Helm's Deep got its name. Because so there was a king of the riders of Rohan, who are known as the Rohirrim, named Helm Hammerhands, and in the story he had two sons who were named and a daughter who was not. And basically what happened was the leader of another kingdom or another, I think it was like a vassal state, showed up and said, "Hey, I want your daughter to marry my son Wolf." Helm said, "Hell no, I have a better offer than that." The two of them got into a fight. Helm killed him with one punch, and a series of events happened that resulted in Wolf swearing revenge, amassing an army of hill people and mercenaries, and driving Helm and the rest of his people into the fortress at Helm's Deep. In the process, both of Helm's sons died. At one point, Helm was a badass and proceeded. By the way, if you think I'm spoiling the movie, sorry that the appendices are been published for 70 years, so you kind of don't have an excuse.
Yeah.
But Helm was a badass at one point and was outside the walls of the Helm's Deep fortress, buried into the living rock of the mountain itself, and he killed so many of them with his bare hands that the fear of his wraith, aka Ghost, kept the hill people away, unwilling to mount the siege until the Helm's nephew and the riders of Rohan, Gondor came with aid. And although Helm died in that last attempt, he was so well remembered for this that the fortress was renamed to Helm's Deep.
Okay.
Now you might notice that in none of that did I mention a kick-ass redhead daughter warrior woman. That's because of course she is an original character. So let's talk about the movie as it is told.
Okay.
So Hera, who was the unnamed daughter I mentioned a minute ago in the appendices,
Yeah.
uh, the problem with having a character like this is that you have to explain, okay, why didn't Tolkien name her? Like, what kept her from being named? What kept her accomplishments from being mentioned?
Hmm.
Um, and the basic answer is that she was. I was actually joking with my buddy after it. I wouldn't call her a girl boss because girl bosses tend to accomplish things. This is somewhat unfair to the character, but because of how they were kind of constrained by the story in the appendices, she
Yeah.
couldn't she couldn't really save the day. She couldn't eh, at the end of the day, they couldn't break the siege themselves, and they had to be saved by Gondor and her cousin.
Yeah.
Um, so what the story ends up being, and it also it makes I actually thought about it, and it makes a lot of sense to elevate an unnamed character like her to this role because we know that Helm Hammerhand and his sons do not survive the siege. So that
Mhm.
means that if we're going to have a point of view character slash through line, we kind of need someone like her, like somebody who's new.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I say all this because, boy, she is very much in the Captain Marvel uh, style of lead heroine,
Mhm.
just much more tolerable. So
So she's not a plank of wood.
she
Oh, maybe a little.
maybe a little. Okay, well, so I gave the basic outline of the story before. Where she's inserted into it is that she was childhood friends with Wolf, the guy who launches the siege to avenge his father. Um,
Oh,
she very clearly doesn't want to marry anybody, and although her father is of the opinion, no, I'm marrying you off to somebody in Gondor. Gondor's nice. Shut up.
yeah.
Um, but like when Wolf shows up and offers um, him her his hand, like she basically says, no, I don't intend to marry anybody.
Hmm.
I don't know if she's meant to be seen as a lesbian or if she just is that independent. She's introduced as, oh, once upon a time, Helm Hammerhand. I believe it was Arwen doing the narration.
Oh, that makes sense.
Once upon a time, there was there was a warrior woman uh, who was a beautiful. She could ride before she could walk. Like she's
Yeah.
basically the bestest ever. Eowyn, excuse me, Eowyn.
Eowyn. Eowyn. Okay. Right.
Um, so she's amazing. She's a great writer. She starts off the movie feeding a shank of meat to one of the giant eagles to foreshadow that they exist and to give them a reason to like her.
Yes. The the
Um,
the, the Deus Ex Eagles.
it's all the eagles. If they asked the eagles for help in the first place, they would never be in such a bad situation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I was saying, she gets offered the marriage. She doesn't want to. She doesn't need no man. She's just very cool and competent. Um, her dad kills the dad of Wolf, and Wolf kind of goes crazy. Wolf in this one is kind of interesting because he is very much like an angry simp, I guess is the way I would put it. Or it's like he's like because he clearly has a thing for her, even though as a child they were having like a mock battle with their little sword and shield, and she sliced his eye,
Oh.
or like gave him a scar across his eye, and he decided to tell her, get out of here before Dad sees that, because of course their dads didn't like each other. So if they found out that
Yeah.
that she had done that to him, there might have been trouble. Basically, Wolf is very toxic, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you get the impression he does actually care for her, and he mostly goes insane because he watched his dad murdered in front of him, and then he like tried to intervene, and Helm basically picked him up like he was a small puppy and slammed him to the ground.
Oh.
And that was actually one thing I noticed consistently about Hera is that she wasn't like successfully fighting off 30 men at once while while reading Gloria Steinem poetry to them. Most of her victories were her being clever, her manipulating something in the environment, or it was Wolf. Because Wolf is because like we realized that Wolf. This is a conversation my buddy and I had afterwards. We realized that Wolf never actually wins a single fight against anybody in a straightforward way. Like he is very much like a conniver, a schemer, political manipulator, and so on.
Yeah.
Right. Like yeah, she gets into Ninja brings it up. Yeah, he got it. The horse helped her with one of those environmental kills.
Yeah.
And so what I would say the biggest handicap to this is that they kind of have to write around her in a way that why don't the songs remember her? Because yeah, it's mostly plausible, I guess, because a lot of what she did was done without somebody else around. And as soon as they save the day, she rides off with her shield maiden nurse, an older woman whose name I forget, who's also an original character. And they basically are planning to go off and go be friends forever, close friends. Like nothing weird there.
Yeah.
So Hera herself, like I said, is tolerable but kind of dull. She doesn't have a whole lot of personality, but I can't, like I said, like she's not the classic captain. Like she is on the Carol Danvers scale of 0 being no Carol Danvers and 1 being 1 Carol Danvers. She's like maybe a 0.5 at worst.
Okay.
As far as other characters go, there aren't actually all that many memorable characters. Wolf stands out to me just because he was the one with like the strongest desire, which was, of course, revenge.
Yeah.
But like everyone else is just kind of is mostly forgettable. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of this movie is that it's largely forgettable. I watched some review streams after I saw this. Like, I would say that like a critical drinker was much more negative on this movie than I was. The group over at Film Threat was much more negative on it than I was.
Oh yeah. They ripped into this movie really
And
bad.
I have to disagree with who is it? Who is that? Meyer Burnett.
Robert Meyer Burnett.
Robert Meyer Burnett. He made a point that I kind of have to disagree with, which was that he was saying, since the plot of The Lord of the Rings is so apocalyptic, anything else feels underwhelming. I kind of have to disagree because this is it is sort of a mundane storyline, but it's also it's a storyline with like some historical precedent, like this type of war over like a war turning out or coming out of trifles.
Yeah.
So like I think that there was a way to do this movie a bit better, but I think it was mostly all right. But I will probably forget most of it within like a month or so.
Yeah. And Ninja says the main problem with the film is that the writers didn't develop the side cast enough, and they were completely scared from expanding the source material other than Hera. Yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Now let's talk about some of the other elements here. The soundtrack is all right, and it lifts quite a bit from the Peter Jackson films. From a visual perspective, like I said, this sort of animated movie is the only way you could possibly get something like the visual style of the Peter Jackson films on this type of budget.
Yeah.
And there are some cool fight sequences. My favorite one was there was a plot line early on where they'd come across the body of a dead mercenary and his rogue Oliphant, who was wounded and gone mad. Like I was really just, and this is part of why you go to the theater sometimes, is the sound mixing on the elephant's roars and rumbles as it was attacking them really just sold the fear of here's this creature that's bigger than an actual elephant, and it's pissed off at you.
Yeah.
Um, now, one criticism I will give is that this is supposed to be in keeping with the Lord of the Rings series in terms of what can happen. There are some action sequences where they kind of go. Critical Drinker said Dragon Ball Z. I forgive him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He isn't really an anime fan. But he definitely got close to My Hero Academia with some of the leaps characters were doing.
Oh. Mm.
I'll get to Ninja's thoughts in a second.
Yeah.
And one amusing detail is that there is a scene where they had Helm Hammerhands fighting a group of orcs who were trying to hunt rings for we don't know who.
Mm.
But they're looking. The boss wants rings for some reason. They say.
Yeah.
So they're out there picking rings off of all of the corpses from the dead hillmen who have been besieging the castle in winter. And he ends up in this fight with an orc. Now, because it's like exaggerated anime proportions, Helm is already like a huge slab of meat.
Yeah.
And he had been on his deathbed in a previous scene. And at first I thought, okay, they were talking about it being the wraith of King Helm. Did he actually die and turn into some sort of super ghost? Because that would be kind of awesome. Because he is fighting hand to hand with an orc who is like 5 times his mass and seems
Oh.
to be doing okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay, snow troll, whatever. They didn't actually say what it was. It was just some sort of big, beefy monster.
Yeah.
But and like he's fighting this thing on pretty even terms, although he does need help in the end. But still, it's just like on a normal human scale thing, like it would have been like a guy punching a grizzly bear.
Yeah. Mm.
Should have had no impact, no matter how strong Helm is. Um,
Yeah.
then, funny thing about that snow troll. So, do you remember back when Batman v Superman came out and people were complaining that their version of Doomsday just looked like a Peter Jackson orc?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Somebody at one of the anime studios decided to have fun with that, and that snow troll, I swear, looks like Doomsday because he's got gray skin and he's got like weird jaggedy bits on his elbows and arms and shoulders. I think it's supposed to just be hair, but it definitely looked a lot like Doomsday's spiky bits.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yep. But as far as other aspects of the visuals, like I said, the visual quality varies. There are a lot of really nice scenes. There are also a lot of scenes that have some very jittery animation, especially crowd shots.
Mm.
Um, I am kind of cursed to notice this thing. My friend didn't, so like I just have an attention to animation detail that would. I've never been tested to see if I'm on the spectrum, but that's a piece of evidence for you that I notice these things so tightly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
In transition,
yeah.
speaking of tightly, okay, so I have to be honest enough to say that maybe part of the reason I give Hera a bit of a pass is because the animators loved Hera. Like, she is objectively hot. If I ever played a Fire Emblem game and she was a character, she would be my waifu in this one. She has like the camera loves to pan across her thick thighs and ample buttocks and
Mm.
like she is very much a fan service character.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe you mentioned she's built like Rose from
Yes,
your books.
yes, exactly. And what I find hilarious is that none of the movie posters have anything that draws attention to this. When like, come on, man, that's like that would be some of your appeal there.
Yeah.
Other amusing little visual things I caught. One brother looked suspiciously like Thor from the Marvel movies,
Mm.
specifically played by Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Um, and her other brother, who is more on the softer side, looked suspiciously like Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. A bit taller, but still, it is.
Yeah, yeah. Ninja says he will fund fan art of Hera for Dini.
Well, whatever artist you fund that with will end up making more money from this than Warner Brothers did, because this
Yeah,
thing tanked like 4 million in the U.S. its opening weekend. I would expect it to do like semi decently in Japan, because I think Lord of the Rings is a bigger property there, and they won't be as turned off by an anime.
yeah.
I think this is kind of evidence that as much as weeb culture has become a bigger thing in the U.S. in the last few years, I credit Netflix having a decent selection during COVID as a big uh, origin story for that.
Yeah.
I think that it kind of has to be like it has to be an anime that uh, people associate with being an anime.
Hmm. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
So it's not you can just make an anime movie of, I don't know, Inspector Gadget and expect American audiences to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, because it's certainly an animation style that the vast majority of people in the United States are not used to seeing.
No, and it's kind of an odd duck too, because like the big fans of Lord of the Rings may not like anime, and big anime fans may not turn out for a Lord of the Ring movie. Like, they keep releasing anime movies pretty often, and aside from the occasional mega hit like My Hero Academia or Dragon Ball or Demon Slayer, very few of them crack the top five.
Yeah.
Um, but again, don't feel too bad for Warner Brothers, because they managed to not only get a property that they'll get to stream and sell physical copies of and rent to Netflix or whatever for the next forever.
Mhm.
Again, $30 million to keep the rights to a $1 billion movie franchise is a very small price to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too. When I'm like, oh, 30, they only spent $30 million on it. Well, that's kind of chump change compared to like making a live action Lord of the Rings movie, which could be
Yeah.
in the hundreds of millions.
Oh, thank you for reminding me.
Mm.
Okay, so I have two last thoughts. Two last thoughts. I can keep going, but I'll keep it down to two last thoughts.
Okay.
One last on the animation. There was legitimately a scene where the Duke that Helm Hammerhand killed was doing hand motions in a meeting, and I seriously thought of Morshu from Legend of Zelda CDI.
Oh.
The way with his broad hand motions, except that animation was technically more fluid.
Yeah.
There was some weird rotoscoping going on.
Mm.
The other thing that probably hurt this movie is that I mentioned to my dad that I saw this, and he actually couldn't be quite sure if it was an animated movie or not, because apparently the trailers start off with live action footage to kind of ease you into it, and then switch over to showing you the animated sequences, which don't do that. That's just confusing people.
Yeah. 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 I can see where that would be. That's not right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, again, overall decent time. And now I'm finally going to go back to Ninja's thought. He believes that this film will age better in the next 10 years than it currently is thought of, not because of the objective quality, rather than the cultural context will be different. I think that this one definitely uh, is hurt by the fact that we've had so many movies that kind of fit this so-called girl boss template. Because like she really is again, like, she's like one of the more tolerable examples. In
Yeah.
2017, I don't think that, like, if the same movie had come out, I don't think there would have been nearly as much mockery or derision of her.
Yeah.
But people have just kind of gotten tired of, and perhaps whether fairly or unfairly, the audience is never wrong in matters of opinion.
Hmm.
The general collective of the audience, or a large percentage of the audience, has gotten tired of movies like action movies about female characters.
Yeah.
And D-Rona
Yeah.
says, tired of all these anime films coming out, anime becoming mainstream is a mistake. Well, the good news is that since this wasn't a huge, resounding success, it may scare away other companies.
Yeah, yeah. So I think anime is safe for the time being.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, changing gears to animation that we wish was more mainstream because they deserve the
Indeed,
attention.
indeed, yes. The new episode of Monkey Wrench dropped last week.
Indeed, and just because we like this show and wanted to, as always, do whatever little bit we can to put more eyes on it, we're here to talk about it.
Yes. Yeah, so episode 4 picks up after episode 3, where Shrike and Beebs had taken on some cargo that did some bad stuff to their ship. It was like,
It's like a
oh,
sentient fungus that tried to take
so,
them over.
right, yeah, and Beebs communed with a mushroom god or goddess. I can't remember what it was. And then it just kind of all went away, and and so now they are so they're still delivering their cargo, but they end up getting stuck in space traffic, basically.
Yep. I do kind of like how non-specific they are with some of the technobabble in this one. Yeah, they don't really describe how the space engines work. They just call the stuff ink. Like, yeah, so can you believe someone tried to put red ink in a blue engine? Come on, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they so while they're waiting, they note that they happen to notice there's a rather large casino
Yes,
nearby, and of course, Shrike has a very bad gambling problem.
Shrike is kind of amusing because it's like, what problem doesn't he have when you get down to it? I mean,
It's
I
true.
guess he doesn't seem to be an actual alcoholic because he is portrayed going to a bar, but he's not like. Actually, no, wait, no, never mind. He is mildly alcoholic because after he blows their money on a bunch of stuff, he goes to the bar to to um to drown his sorrows. So never mind.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So they stop off in this casino, and Beebs reluctantly gives Shrike the company credit card. Uh,
Because he has to actually go make some legitimate business expenses.
yes, yeah, because Beebs has got to get a new part for his prosthetic arm because he's kind of like Jet Black from Cowboy Bebop. Um, and of course, while he's doing that, he has a couple of run-ins. One of them is with a guy from his home planet who has tusks. So I'm guessing Beebs, his species are like descended from walruses.
Yeah, there's some sort of space walrus. Yeah,
Yeah, but Beebs doesn't have tusks, and I guess there's some sort of like it's implied that there's like some kind of social caste system with ones who have tusks and ones who don't, or they have long ones and short ones.
yeah, and what the conversation he had with the other member of his species, I couldn't quite tell if it meant that like he was talking about Beebs' like inferiority, and did he make some sort of reference like it coming from his mother's side or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, from his mom's side, which Beebs did not take too kindly to.
No, no. So there's a possibility in my mind that that either he's like a half breed, which also explains why he's so much smaller than the other walrus man,
Yeah,
or possibly just that he's just like a runt.
yeah, yeah, and of course, as he's getting his arm looked at, we have the dinosaur pirate lady shows
The,
up.
the cyborg dinosaur muscle mommy,
Yes.
who we met in the first episode, shows up.
Yeah, and of course she keeps telling Beebs, like you got to dump Strike. He's dead weight. He's holding you back.
Yep.
Uh,
And Shrike in this episode doesn't really make the case against that.
no, he doesn't, because when he gets the company credit card, he gambles it all away, completely maxes it out.
Yep. Uh, he gets arrested because he gets in a fight with this green. It's like a space greaser motorcycle rider version of Ghost Rider.
Yeah, and of course you see this little like cutscene of a news broadcast warning people about the green ones. Like if you see a green one, report them to the authorities.
Right, because that's apparently a sign that you've been going into the quarantine zone of whatever semi-defined apocalypse that the Terrans had invited upon the galaxy some time ago.
Yes, and if you don't remember our previous review of the first three episodes, or if you didn't see it, apparently humans are bad in this universe.
Yeah, I think I wasn't quite clear on this. I don't know if that they were the ones who unleashed the mushrooms, or if it's a different calamity.
Yeah, but yeah, they're like all these like posters everywhere that say if you see a Terran, report him immediately. And
Right. Yep. Um, so overall thoughts on the episode. What I'll say is that this is definitely a show that is made animation first, as well. Put it
mhm, yeah,
like there are a lot of just awesome shots and character designs in this show.
there are, yeah. Yeah, they put a lot of time and effort into making each character like, yeah, having a distinct look, uh and the way they move, and their mannerisms and everything is just, I mean, on point.
Yep. And like we mentioned in the last review, characters are very rarely completely still. Like, yeah, it's kind of amusing to me that a $30 million anime movie, War of the Rohirrim, has a lot of janky, stuttery animation in places. Where this one, where I know from their, I'm a patron, I know from their Patreon report that they spent $50,000 on this episode, 56,000 on this episode to hire the animation team and whatnot.
Wow.
Oh wait, no, that was that. Never mind. That chart was in the end of this episode. That's right. That's right.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But so it's like, wow, you guys deserve every subscription and view we can shove your way.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, part of me kind of hopes that maybe someday, like, some company will come along and throw a bunch of money at them to crank out more episodes on a faster basis. But the other part of me is like, no, I like it this way. Don't mess with it.
Right, because as soon as they get an actual budget, they're going to have, or as soon as like, I'm just going to throw out a name here. As soon as Amazon cuts them a check for $1 million, that $1 million is not going to be able to be spent handcrafting every episode the way they are right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, let's see here. Other things I'll say is that there were a couple of lines where the dialogue didn't seem to flow. Like
Mhm.
I said, that's why I say it's like an animation first show. Like the writing is, uh, it's thematically good and the ideas are good. Like
Yeah.
it's like a B when it could be an A with a couple of tweaks.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Ninja says, yeah, learn from Hasbin Hotel. Yeah, don't
Look,
do it.
I don't think I'm just be honest here. I don't think Has Been Hotel, based on the pilot episode they released on YouTube ages ago, was going to be a show I wanted to watch. So
Yeah,
anything I've heard about the Amazon show has just confirmed that bias.
yeah, yeah. Same with what was the other one we watched?
Oh,
Uh,
the magical digital
or
circus, amazing digital circus.
Digital Circus. Yeah, because I think Netflix picked that one up.
They did, which yeah, I mean it's just not for me.
Yeah,
I think the funniest observation I had is that uh, a lot of this show is a bit more touchy feely. It can't, you could almost say, what if Steven Universe was designed to appeal to teenage boys?
yeah,
Because you know Shrike has the magic jewel embedded in the back of his head, like
yeah.
you know, Steven has his gem,
Mhm.
uh, and a lot of the show is about Beebs and Shrike's friendship and like talking through their feelings and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the other thing is that we might be at the tail end of the street. No, we are at the tail end of the streaming boom. So there probably isn't an easy $5 million check to make 10 more episodes of this or whatever. So
Yeah,
they're just gonna have to tough it out in the meantime, and we'll keep watching them.
indeed. Yes. I will. I don't know if I did it in the description, but on the replay on this video, I'll leave a link to the YouTube channel, so
Yep.
for people to check it out.
All 4
And
episodes of the show are available to watch for free, so you
yes,
don't have an excuse.
right. Although, as DB pointed out, they do have a Patreon and I believe YouTube channel membership. So if you are inclined to financially support them, you have avenues to do so.
Yes, please get us episode 5. I want to see what happens when they chase down the space greaser.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Um,
So before we get to our last review, I need to take a quick pit stop. So I will be right back.
okay. Do you want me to go ahead and start on the review?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't have a very good transition for it. So I'll just say what it is here. It is Christmas Vacation. Um, I have to make a confession. I've never seen this movie before. This was my first viewing of it. I think that was mainly because this was not a regular viewing movie in my household for whatever reason. I think I think probably partially because my family we weren't really big Chevy Chase fans. I mean, I think we liked him enough, but we weren't like going out of our way to watch one of his movies. I think we preferred him more as in an ensemble cast like a la Three Amigos, but I think this was either the second or third vacation movie. Not entirely sure. I think I've seen all of them except for the European one. I enjoyed let's say I enjoyed the first vacation where they're going to Wally World.
Which weirdly enough, that's like I haven't seen. This is the only vacation movie I've seen.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think the European vacation one is the only one I haven't seen. I've seen the other ones, although I haven't seen the reboot one that they did a few years back.
Oh god, they did a reboot of this thing.
Yeah. Well, kind of a quasi reboot. It was with Ed Helms, the guy from The Hangover, the one with ripped his tooth out.
Okay.
He plays Rusty in that movie.
Was Rusty his son?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Rusty and Rusty's his son, Audrey's his daughter, and they're always played by a different actor and actress in every movie.
That makes sense because they're trying to keep them like generally the same age.
Yeah, they're kind of like Bart and Lisa Simpson.
Yep.
So in this movie, Audrey's played by Juliette Lewis, who she's been in a bunch of movies. And Rusty was played by the guy from the Big Bang Theory, not Sheldon, the other guy. But I guess to get into the story of the movie, it's Christmas time, and the whole Griswold clan, or at least some of the Griswold clans, coming to celebrate Christmas with them. And of course, Clark, being Clark, he just goes over the top with everything, and wacky hijinks ensue that threaten or that eventually just make him snap and lose his mind.
Right. So I'll say my experience with this movie, I only saw it for the first time about 5 years ago because it was my sister's ex-husband's one of their Christmas go-tos.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying before, like, this movie was not really in my family's Christmas viewing rotation, because it just I think it was mainly just because my family, we weren't really big Chevy Chase fans.
Which, to be fair, Chevy Chase has a reputation.
He does, yeah. Um, and actually, I have a little story about this. So Chris Columbus was originally supposed to direct this movie,
Hmm.
um, but but he had to quit because he was butting heads with Chevy Chase.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
and
makes
then
sense.
yeah, but then Chris Columbus ended up making Home Alone after that, so it worked out for him.
Right. Also, now
Um,
that I think about it, like, when was the last time you really had a franchise like this spawn a successful Christmas special? I've noticed that like there's what Christmas movies are made,
yeah,
they tend to be like more custom built from the ground up to be Christmas movies.
yeah, yeah. I can't think of really any other ones besides this one. Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's
I'm even
yeah.
trying to think of an example of a movie franchise that did this successfully besides Christmas Vacation. I'm sure there's
Well,
an example out there somewhere, but
the only one I could think of would be maybe the Muppets
oh yeah, yeah,
with Muppet Christmas Carol.
that's true. That's true.
Um, but yeah. So I'm gonna be honest. I thought this movie was all right.
Daniel, how dare you?
I
Nobody on this channel has ever expressed anything but love for a comedy classic of some sort.
I know. Yeah.
Definitely not me repeatedly with your beloved childhood comedy movies.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well.
I,
Hey, Arcos.
I, I would put myself in the category of like I can largely view it free of nostalgia just because I didn't grow up with it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it works more than it doesn't, but there are definitely a lot of questionable scenes. Like if I had to compare it to last week's Christmas movie we reviewed, A Christmas Story, which that was my first time seeing that all the way through.
Yeah.
I'd say that Christmas Story is more consistent. This one has higher highs and lower lows for me.
Yeah. I mean, the opening scene when they go out into the out in the country and they cut down, to cut down their own tree, which is like, I mean, it's taller than their house.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, what are you thinking there? And then Rusty's like, Dad, did you bring a saw? Uh, they just rip it out of the ground.
Yeah. Or like the bit where they end up stuck under the log truck.
Oh yeah, it's like the Fast and the Furious. I wonder
Yeah,
that's where they got the idea for that. Well, I don't
very possible.
know. Yeah. Oh, the neighbors. Yeah, Ninja bring. Yeah,
Oh
the
man. Okay, so I tend to go with I've referred to this before. I call it the Bugs Bunny rule,
yeah,
which is based on Chuck Jones always said like when he was doing a Bugs Bunny cartoon that Bugs was never allowed to be the one to instigate the problem. He always had to like somebody had to go too far, and then Bugs was allowed to get revenge.
yeah, yeah,
Other directors didn't believe in that, so you might notice that Bugs' behavior change if it was like Frizz Freeling or whatnot.
yeah.
But anyway, this movie violates that all over the place because those poor neighbors did nothing wrong.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. Clark makes their lives a living hell.
The only thing you can accuse them of is being 80s yuppies.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You see their house; they have all of the latest electronics from that era, and they drive nice cars, and he's got his hair slicked back. Yeah,
Right, and he has a little ponytail, I think, too.
yeah, yeah,
Um, they go out jogging all the time, which I think in the '80s, like being a jogger was like shorthand for being a yuppie.
yeah,
And that they go out in the old style full body sweatsuits that are designed to make you sweat on like overheat you and sweat you under there. like they basically they're portrayed as being involved with a lot of fads of the period.
Yeah, yeah,
Didn't they? Were they eat? They weren't eating sushi for a dinner, but I remember they were like having some sort of weird Christmas dinner.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. So, but over the course of things, he insults them. In an accident, a spear of ice ends up going through their window, destroying their tape deck. They have at least one window destroyed.
Yeah, and oh god, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff happened.
Oh yeah, when he turned on the lights, their house their house lost, or they were blinded, and he fell down the stairs. I think the only thing you can accuse the neighbors of doing wrong is he didn't stand up uh, to the Griswolds faster.
Yeah, yeah. Boy, I wouldn't want them as my neighbors.
No. Um, yes, like the movie doesn't really have like a sense of comedic karma where it's meted out based on your behavior. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and I could see you not finding Chevy Chase's character particularly sympathetic because aside from the desire to just give his family a very nice Christmas, he isn't a very nice person.
he isn't. No, yeah, and there's a scene where a couple of scenes in there where they show him at work. There's a subplot in there where he's waiting for his Christmas bonus, and because he's already put a down payment on a pool that they're going to put in their backyard, which I don't know why you would want to have a pool in Chicago.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to use it very often. You're only going to be able to use it like 3 or 4 months out of the year. Um,
Look, he's not a very smart man because you also don't put a down payment with money you don't have yet.
that's true. Yeah. And and of course it's not really it's described what he does, but it sounds like he makes like chemicals for different products. And
It's
yeah,
he basically RFK would hate him because it sounds like he's working with like making artificial food products. Like
yeah,
one of the products is like a coating for cereal that keeps it crunchy in milk, and then like in another scene, he's using he's oiling up his toboggan with a I believe it's called it a non-caloric food oil or something like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking that too when he was describing that cereal additive. I'm like, oh, so the thing that RFK Jr. is trying to get out of our foods.
Yep, he's basically there to put it in.
Yeah. Oh, Ninja mentions the squirrel scene. Yeah,
Yeah, that was good. Like that was
yeah,
another example of the poor neighbors. Like once one bit they by the way, before we get into too deep into spoilers,
yeah.
we've mentioned a couple of highlight scenes. There really isn't a plot to spoil per se
No.
because it is just like a series of escalating events of him dealing with his extended family, work, random happenstances on the road to having a nice Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, which is kind of part of the course for a lot of National Lampoon movies like Animal House and or even I guess even the first Vacation was like that in a way.
Now that I think about it, maybe, uh, and I kind of noticed this with Christmas Story too. Just having Christmas as a destination helps a lot of these movies seem more on point than a typical 80s comedy because
Yeah.
you have a fixed destination you have to get to.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but okay, so do we recommend it? It's probably worth a watch just to suddenly get a whole bunch of cultural references.
Hmm.
Though I think that A Christmas Story is more iconic in terms of like there isn't a line from this movie um, on the level of "You'll shoot your eye out, kid."
Yeah. Yeah, or what's another one? Oh, fragile. That must be Italian. It says fragile, honey. Oh.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's because this movie, like a lot of Chevy Chase stuff, like you know that he got his start on SNL being the one who would fall from ladders pretending to be Gerald Ford.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was my understanding there'd be no math. Yeah.
Um, he isn't necessarily. He's not like a very dialogue focused comedian, or at least a lot of the stuff I've seen with him is more focused on physical pratfalls or him just being wildly offended by something that he's just run into.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I will say this one is less appropriate for the small ones than a Christmas Story.
Yeah. This one's PG-13, if I recall.
That would make sense and it earns it.
Yeah.
Because there's to add into the Griswold is not a nice guy thing.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a bit early on where he runs into a voluptuous woman at a counter, and he keeps not being able to look in her in the eye, and keeps making Freudian slips.
Yes.
It's a little bit nipply out today. Nipply. What am I saying? Nippy out today.
Yeah.
And then in a weird sequence, he ends up looking out and fantasizing about the pool. And I believe it's the same woman there,
Yeah,
eventually
it is.
slowly
Yeah.
stripping out of her bikini until he's interrupted by a small child.
Yeah.
What are you looking at? Like
Yeah,
that.
that
That was
was
an
a
awkward
little.
moment.
Yeah, that was awkward. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's also depictions of human excrement, just a general level of chaos. So
Yeah.
I would say, like, keep to that PG-13 rating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do believe there is one F bomb in there. So
Probably I didn't notice it, but then again, I keep being surprised at, and this is maybe just because I grew up kind of sheltered with movies I was watching. If you'd asked me, I would have told you, oh yeah, there were no f bombs in movies until like the 2000s. It was kind of, and then like there I am watching like a Dirty Harry movie or like 48 Hours, where I was like, wait, what?
yeah.
My virgin ears.
Yeah.
All right, so I'd say generally worth watching. Probably,
Yeah.
your mileage may vary. It won't hurt you any.
Yeah,
Um,
mild recommendation for me. But if you had to, if you ask me which movie do I prefer, this movie or Christmas Story, I'm picking Christmas Story.
With that one, this was my second time seeing it versus one time for Christmas Story, so I think I'd have to see them both twice to really gauge it because I think I enjoyed this one the second time more than the first.
Yeah, okay. And that might be the case with me. If I give it a second viewing, I might appreciate it more.
Yep, or you might appreciate it less. That's the
No.
fun of rewatches.
Yes.
All right, so to get into some more spoiler-heavy things here, just because it being a comedy movie, knowing the gag in advance can ruin things. So kind of consider this. We're now talking to people who have seen the movie a million times every year since they were kids.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like we're saying, he's not the nicest character. We kind of already described the one scene that kind of made him seem a bit irredeemable in my eyes.
Yeah.
Not that it's normal for a guy to have fantasies, but it's weird to portray them the way that they did.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and although we were talking before the show, it was a little par for the course because in the first movie, in Vacation, they're being followed by Christy Brinkley driving a Ferrari, a red Ferrari, and he's flirting with her the whole time. Oh.
Yeah, which come on, Griswold,
Yeah.
you're a family man. Be reasonable.
Yeah.
Other interesting highlights of the movie. Let's see here. They had Bethany, his aunt, played by Mae Questel, who was the original voice of Betty Boop.
Yes, and when you hear her voice, you'll definitely pick up on that. Very, very high.
Yep. Let's see. Let's see here. Her husband was played by William Hickey, who has a pretty wide career. I would say that a lot of the stuff he was in wasn't like the most advanced, but guy had a career going back to, I believe, going back to the 50s, so, on TV and movies. So
Yeah.
similar level of get as Betty Boop.
Yeah. And you had I didn't recognize the actor who plays Clark's dad, John Randolph. Okay, he had a very good, very prolific career. Looks like, judging from his IMDb.
And so your other actors I actually notice here. Well, you had Randy Quaid as Cousin
Uh,
Eddie, who we kind
yeah.
of left out of the review despite him being a huge part of the movie.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to spoil it too much, but yeah.
Yeah, now that we're in the spoiler section, uh, although one last thought, Doris Roberts played
Oh
his
yeah.
the Chevy Chase's mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Um, she's one of those character actors who I couldn't tell you what I remember her from, but just like, oh yeah, I immediately know you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Ninja says, yeah, she was Mildred on Remington Steel. She
Which
was.
is not a movie, which is not a show I ever saw.
I never watched it, but I'm familiar with it. But most people remember her from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. She was Ray's mom, Marie. Yeah.
Hmm.
Who if you watch enough episodes of that show and you see how she is, you'll know what my grandmother was like.
Oof.
Very, very similar personalities. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, and then
All right. We've popped that cork. Let's get back to Cousin Eddie.
yes, Cousin Eddie. Yeah. Um yeah, so
Cousin.
yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so Cousin Eddie shows up about halfway through the movie as a surprise to everyone, especially Chevy Chase.
Yeah. Yeah, he just pops up. He just shows up. Right after he lights the Christmas, it gets the Christmas lights going. He's just standing there.
We kind of didn't mention that subplot, but that was so. A Ninja liked the whole squirrel thing the best. I think that maybe just as somebody who works in tech support, I can man, I felt that scene where nothing was working, even no matter how many tests you did.
Yeah, yeah,
And like in that one, it is usually just something stupid that you overlooked, like, oh, someone turned off the light switch next to the power strip that was powering everything.
yeah, yeah. I've been there too. Yeah. But yeah, yeah. So Eddie and his wife, and then two of their kids show up, and of course, like with the first movie, Eddie and the family have fallen on hard times. Um,
And they are there to mooch.
yes, they are there to mooch, and the in the aforementioned scene where after Clark gets interrupted with his weird erotic fantasy by the little girl. The little girl is Eddie's daughter, and they she basically tells him that they're probably not going to get anything for Christmas from Santa or anything, and
Yeah,
so
they didn't
Clark
last
feels
year.
yeah, they didn't last year, yeah, and so Clark feels bad, and so he and Beverly D'Angelo, his wife, Ellen, they're like, well, we should help him out, because
Which,
they start to feel guilty.
which as much of a jerk as Clark Griswold is in the movie in some ways, that was
Yeah,
like, okay, that's like one of your nicer moments.
yeah, yeah. But of course, cousin Eddie is still cousin Eddie, and he's empties the famous scene where he empties his uh,
His,
sewage tank, his
his
RV,
motorhomes, yeah.
yeah, motorhomes. The sheriff's full. He just empties it into the
Yeah.
sewer,
Ugh.
which comes back later on in the movie.
Yeah. They believe in setup and payoff in this movie.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was written by John Hughes, so.
Yep. Um, see, but now what's funny is that apparently they made a spin-off movie starring Cousin Eddie, which boy, everything I've ever heard about that one is that it did not work, which I can
Yeah.
understand because Cousin Eddie is a funny character. Um, he kind of stands as the only character who's like Clark's peer in a way, like the same rough age,
Yeah.
both dads. But man, it's kind of like how you like garlic, but you wouldn't just sit there and eat a whole clove of garlic,
No, that would,
or
yeah.
excuse me, you wouldn't sit there and eat a whole head of garlic in one sitting.
Yeah. 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 He's good in small doses. Yeah.
Yep. Um, I also think that this movie is I can kind of see why it wouldn't appeal to my family because most of the Christmas movies we watched that involved a family were more positive than this.
Yeah.
This is definitely for people who dread the holidays.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. Um, and, uh, and I could kind of, I can see why I also see why my family probably didn't really like this movie is because like I was getting kind of frustrated in a few places
Oh,
with
do tell.
oh I mean like the aforementioned scene when he's trying to get the lights up and then then they don't work or when he gets stuck in the attic. It's just like and it's stuff like that or just little things where it just after a while it just kind of builds and builds and it's like, oh, okay.
I think it's the difference between like or how you react to it is do you relate to these moments and you laugh because you have a nice catharsis,
Yeah,
or do you relate to these moments and it just brings up memories of the moments that you relate to
yeah.
and just up your stress level?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Like that's just my general theory is that because like there are, and this is like a personal thing. I noticed that the characters in ensemble cast that I usually like the least are the characters who are like me because I see them making the mistakes I do in their daily life and just want them to stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can understand that. Of course, another character we forgot to mention was is Clark's boss.
Oh yeah, played by Bill Murray's brother.
Yeah, Brian Doyle Murray. Can't remember what it was, Mister.
Yeah, not important.
Yeah, yeah,
He these days he's mostly known by the younger generation for being the voice of the Flying Dutchman in SpongeBob.
yeah, yeah,
Which, as soon as I heard his voice, I said, "Wait a minute."
yeah,
Very distinct, raspy voice.
yeah. He does. Yeah. What's interesting is that I guess he gets along. Chevy Chase gets along with Brian Doyle Murray, but Bill Murray not so much.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I remember hearing a story about when they were filming Caddyshack. They just I think they had like one scene together, and that was all they could do because that's all they could stand of each other.
You know, just by I've never met Chevy Chase, obviously. Just by every reputation and story I've ever heard about him, he's kind of like the living embodiment of if everyone you meet in the day is an asshole, maybe you're the problem.
Yeah,
Definitely seems like a very my way or the highway kind of guy
yeah,
for somebody who I would call like a, a decent acting talent, but
yeah,
like he almost seems to have like a an ego that like he's a sort of Laurence Olivier.
yeah. Or Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like I don't want to take away from a long and successful career. Just like it just sounds like he's might take himself a bit too seriously.
yeah, yeah. Um,
It's ironic for a comedic actor.
yes, yeah. But yeah, I mean, but that's what kind of why I said the movie was all right is because I mean there were parts of the movie that I enjoyed, I thought were funny, and then there were other parts of it that were a little frustrating for me,
Hmm.
and it was just like yeah, and also too, yeah, Clark is not very likable.
No,
Yeah,
he Yeah, his desire to give his family a nice Christmas is really the only relatable thing. So I
Yeah.
would imagine that if we end up watching Vacation at some point, or Summer Vacation,
Yeah.
whatever it's called, um, my opinion of the character might drop to your levels just because there won't be the excuse of, well, he just wants to give his family a nice Christmas. He's going too far type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's also a general thing about comedy, is that comedy is where how we dance around things we don't like talking about in general.
Yeah.
Um, well, the problem being that comedy is the thing that can offend you the fastest more than anything else, or maybe offend is too strong of a word, but it can disquiet you quickly if you aren't on board with the topics they're bringing up.
Yeah. 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 It's subjective. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, like our first movie review, this one's on Max. Uh, I'm sure it'll probably be on there through the end of the year or in perpetuity. I mean, although I would imagine most people are probably only going to watch it for the next couple of weeks and forget
Right.
about it until next year.
Most likely. I would love to see the streaming stats for certain Christmas movies and see like are there any times of the year outside of the holiday season that, like, is March a better time for Christmas movies than June, or are people watching Christmas movies in June because it helps them feel cool?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Die Hard, you can watch that all year long because it's not a Christmas movie.
It is a movie that happens to take place at Christmas.
Yes.
In fact, so Daniel, future you note,
Mhm.
when you post this VOD,
Yes.
go ahead and include the link to the poll I posted on X,
Okay. Yeah.
because next week we're reviewing Gremlins, and after watching it, I'm curious how many people think it is or is not a Christmas movie, because I have a thought on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do too. It's we'll get into it next week, but yeah. But I think we've said all we said need to say for this week.
Indeed.
Um, well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring the bell. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas indeed.
Yes, and we'll see you the day after Christmas because we've got a couple of stuff, things to review, and we're not traveling anywhere, so yeah. But yeah, we'll see you next week, everybody.
Good night, everyone.